after 7 o'clock, I'll be able to tell you what exact dates are there. It doesn't depend on me. It depends on the Board of Studies. So the Board of Studies will let me know what dates they approve. Some of your friends who came to meet me today saw that, there were a number of holidays. So there's, a lot of problems with that. That is why, anyway, half of you are not joining. So I guess we can give any day. You're also prepared that you don't even need to come for the class. But anyway, the thing is, till 1 week before we can have our classes. So teaching will be completed by, let's say, 4th or 5th of January. I am asking the teachers to complete their teaching by the end of next week. Okay? And we have to, and then we can take the internals. The internals can be during the exam, the internals can be before the exam, the internals can be after the exam. Internal examination, we can take it at any point of time. Okay, so you all told me that the days that you are free is from the 9th and is from the 9th. If we start your exam on the 14th, then 9th to me is too late. So when do you have your internal exams? Can you tell me in which paper, which date, if you can give me? Can you tell me when do you have your internal exams with Lipi ma'am, with Madhurima ma'am?
Ma'am, with Lipi ma'am, we have from 27th.
Okay, and with Madhurima ma'am?
And Madhurima ma'am was
7 and 8 July.
7 and 8.
Okay. So,
Ma'am, Lipi ma'am is 4 और 5 तारीख.
Yes, you have to tell.
4 और 5 बोलछो.
Ma'am, basically 4 और 5 July. 27, she asked us to go to the university for clarifications, certain clarifications. There will be professors present. And on 4th and 5th, we are having her internals.
Yes, ma'am.
আর রাজা স্যারের পেপার 8ই জুলাইয়ের মধ্যে আমাদের দিতে হবে জমা, দুটো পেপার।
ওকে, তাহলে আমরা 2 তারিখে করি।
ওকে ম্যাম।
Okay, ma'am.
ওকে ম্যাম।
ঠিক আছে? Second is okay?
Yes, ma'am, it's fine.
July?
Yes, ma'am.
It's Saturday, 2nd July. And, since it's going to be online, we can even go on until Sunday if need be. But let us start by 12 o'clock on 2nd July. When we start feeling crazy, then I'll end it. Okay?
Okay, ma'am.
Okay. So, Jaya, send me the topics and everything pretty quickly. So
Yes, ma'am, I'll send you after the class.
Okay, very good. It's going to be fairly easy since it's going to be online. But, one thing I'm very, very strict about, that is not more than 3 slides and not more than 3 points per slide. Do Do you get it? Because you're not supposed to write everything in your slides. You are supposed to write just the points, and you're supposed to, sort of discuss it in class.
Ma'am, so in total, including our introduction, like roll number and the topic, it would be 4 slides.
Exactly. Put your roll number and registration number as well. Okay. And yeah, put your names as well. I really don't care. It's an internal exam, so we are supposed to know the names.
Okay, ma'am.
Okay. ठीक আছে, then.
Ma'am, can I include another slide for writing the end, like after I finish giving the points?
No point. No point. That's going to increase your number of slides. You cannot have more than 4 slides, Ritika.
Ma'am, can you increase?
What?
Ma'am, can you increase the points? Like, can we put 5 or 4 points at least?
No.
Okay,
You
okay,
have to
ma'am.
bring the points down to 3, and you have to discuss it in class. I mean, when you make presentation.
Okay, ma'am.
From 12 o'clock on 2nd. Okay?
Okay, ma'am. Okay, ma'am.
Okay. Today we will deal with causes of conflict in Sri Lanka. Did we do that last year?
Yes,
I mean,
ma'am.
last year. Okay, did we do also JVP conflict in Sri Lanka? Did we do JVP conflict in Sri Lanka? Hello?
No, ma'am. No, ma'am.
You didn't do JVP conflict in Sri Lanka.
No, ma'am. Sri Lanka ধরাই হয়নি।
ধরা হয়নি last semester-এ?
ধরা হয়েছিল।
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
লাস্ট সেমিস্টারের কথা জানি না ম্যাম, আমি ক্লাস তো করিনি, আমি ভেবেছি এই সেমের কথা বলা হচ্ছে তাই।
না, এই সেমে করা হয়নি, সেই জন্য আমি জিজ্ঞেস করছি যে লাস্ট সেমেস্টারে কি করেছি, কারণ তোমাদের সিলেবাস ইজ ভেরি ওভারল্যাপিং। তো সেটা তোমরা জেভিপি কনফ্লিক্ট করোনি লাস্ট সেমেস্টারে? কি রে ভাই, কিছু বলো।
I think we did. I'm not sure, but I think we did it.
Okay. Okay. Let's see what we have. Okay, let me go to JVP conflict in Sri Lanka. Have a look and then tell me, okay?
ম্যাম জেভিপি মানে কি জানাতা ভীমকুটি হ্যাঁ ওটা হয়নি ওটা করা হয়নি। আর এলটিটির একটা রেফারেন্স দেওয়া বন্ধ হয়েছিল এমনি।
I don't think this we did not do this.
Yes, ma'am. হয়নি।
Have a look at the PowerPoint and see if you've done it or not.
হ্যাঁ ম্যাম মাহিস অর্গানাইজেশনের এটা হ্যাঁ না করা হয়নি ওটা।
ঠিক আছে। দেখতে পাচ্ছ কে?
নো ম্যাম।
No, ma'am.
ফিল হচ্ছে। তাহলে আমি একটা কাজ করি, তোমাদের না কেউ একটা তোমাদের ইমেল অ্যাড্রেস পাঠাও, আমি তাকে পাঠিয়ে দিচ্ছি। সে বা দাঁড়াও, তোমাদের সাইটে আমি দিয়ে দিই, তোমাদের হোয়াটসঅ্যাপে দেখে আমার বলো তো করেছো কিনা। পাঠিয়ে দিয়েছি তোমাদের সাইটে, দেখো। পেয়ে গেছো তোমরা?
Yes, ma'am, received.
Yes, ma'am.
Have a look, open it and have a look. Have you got it? Tell me, have you done this?
No, ma'am, no, ma'am.
Okay. Jagadhapti, are you there? Jagadhapti, can you switch it on?
Ma'am, I cannot hear you.
I said, can you switch it on? Can you pull up, share your screen and pull up the PPT so that I can explain?
Actually, I have joined from my mobile and my laptop is not, it's actually giving me a bit of trouble. So I don't think so I will be able to do it.
Anybody who can sort of use their mobile as laptop and share it? Yeah, can you? Gurli,
Ma'am,
can you?
I'll try sharing my screen.
Right.
Ma'am,
Do it the other way.
ma'am, can
Turn
you
it
see
the
my
other way. Yeah, just turn it the other way.
Mom, I did, but can you see it? I've started screen sharing, Mom.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Very good. Okay, next one. You all know this. So next one. Next one. You all know the history. So next one.
Left and the politics.
Bring it down to left politics.
Left politics.
Left
Yes,
politics, yeah. Yeah, this is the one. So as you can see, in the 1930s, there was birth of left politics in Sri Lanka. The LSPs, the Lanka Samaja Party. It was established in 1936 and it posed a challenge to the constitutionalist leadership in the state council. That is Jayavardhana. Okay. My goodness, what is happening here, Jaya? The LSSP could have captured more seats if the election schedule for 40 and 41, had taken, if the election as scheduled had taken place. But it was Second World War which sort of ruined the chances of LSSP. Next one. Okay, somebody, Ritika, read it.
Yes, ma'am. Earlier in 1937, the Sinhal Mahasabha was formed as a radical group within the Congress with the aim of building a political program out of the religio-linguistic nationalism of the early 20th century. LSSP experienced a split on ideological grounds. The Stalinists were expelled and LSSP proclaimed itself to be a Trotskyist party aligned to the Fourth International. Under the defense regulations, LSSP leaders were arrested and detained without trials. In March 1942, it was declared an illegal organization.
Next slide. Go ahead.
Transfer of power and dominion status. The Salisbury Constitution unheard the dominion. Ushered the dominion status for Sri Lanka. However, unlike India or Burma, the transfer of power in Sri Lanka took place in a peaceful way, and it was dominated by D.S. Senanayak, whose United National Party UNP aimed at solving political problems by reaching a consensus. British air and sea bases remained intact. British Royal Navy stationed at Trincomalee remained until 1956. Prominent Tamil leaders like Ponnambalam and A. Mahadeva joined his cabinet.
So what happened was that in the 1930s, the first left party was formed. This was the Lanka Samaja Party. Okay? So, there was considerable following, particularly because Sri Lankan working class was divided between the plantation workers and the urban working class. And can you just hold on for a second? I have an important one. For them, the 40s was a very crucial time. But there were no elections in the 40s because of the Second World War. However, it was obvious that the time when politics was getting radicalized, there was a lot of support for the left parties, and the left parties were against the constitutionalists such as Jayavardhane, such as Senanayaka, etc. However, after the transfer of power, radicalism did not pay off. Because the thing is, the transfer of power in Sri Lanka was fairly peaceful. And Senanayake was almost like, the British. He was, one of those suited, booted gentlemen who was educated abroad, etc. However, he was very similar to a lot of the leaders in India. However, in India, Nehru or Ambedkar, whoever we talk about, was a lot more radicalized. But Senanayake was not radicalized, neither, and also the Tamil leaders were also extremely suave, and because, if you look at it from the class perspective, then they were all upper middle class or upper class, whether it's Punambalam or Mahadeva or Senanayake, and their class affinity sort of drove them against the left. And, in 1948, when there was a question as to whether the plantation Tamils could be citizens of Sri Lanka or not, the Jaffna Tamils actually voted against the citizenship of the plantation Tamils. So it was not so much an ethnic divide as a class divide at that point of time. Only later, Sri Lanka, if you have gone through my PowerPoint and teaching on the conflict in Sri Lanka, only later did the Sri Lankans get radicalized through ethnicity. Initially, it was actually class that radicalized people. So you see the working class or the plantation workers, etc., joined the left parties. And the Tamils, the upper class Tamils, were so nervous about this left radicalization of the plantation workers, etc., that when it was decided that, who would be citizens of Sri Lanka, they completely left the working class in a lurch and said only Jaffna Tamils would be citizens, and plantation Tamils who had come to Sri Lanka maybe 200 years back as working class, because they were radicalized, they were absolutely the other Tamils or the educated, the upper class Tamils. They dissociated themselves, much to their own chagrin and future woe, from the plantation Tamils. Okay, next slide, please. Akib, Mohammad Akib, are you here? Ankit Chakraborty,
Ma'am.
can you read it?
Yes, ma'am. In the general elections held in 1952, Prime Minister Dudley Senanayake's United National Party (UNP) secured a majority in Parliament. Finance Minister J.R. Jayawardene introduced a budget which abolished the subsidy on rice, as a result of which the price of rice almost got doubled, increased the price of sugar, did away with the free midday meal for school children, and increased postal fees and rail fares. There was a countrywide hartal in 1953 against the UNP government.
Next. Next slide, Jaya.
Mom, I did it.
SWRT Bandanayak was elected the Prime Minister in 1956, and with that there was a tilt towards the Communist bloc. He, in his attempt to protect Sinhala culture, introduced the controversial Sinhala Only Act, recognizing Sinhala as the sole official language of the government, though later it was partially reversed in 1958. Sirimavo Bandanayak, the widow of late SWRD Bandanaik took office as Prime Minister in 1960 and faced an attempted coup d'etat in 1962. During the second term as Prime Minister, her government instituted socialist economic policies, further strengthening ties with the Soviet Union and later China while promoting a policy of non-alignment.
Okay. So what happened was that the Senanakas, the UNP party initially was the party in power. So after Senanayake passed away, the person who sort of took the leadership role was Senanayaka's son, Dudley Senanayake. However, Dudley Senanayake was a very nice gentleman, but he wasn't as charismatic as his father. So Jayavardhane was the finance minister, and he was sort of more charismatic. However, this centrist party actually went conservative, and always rice was subsidized in Sri Lanka because Sri Lanka never grew rice. Because in the British Empire, where did rice come from? Who can tell me where was rice produced?
Ma'am, India.
Ma'am, Burma.
Burma. Exactly, Burma, Myanmar. Rice was produced in Burma and parts of India. So you see, when you were within an empire, you didn't really need to produce rice. But once these countries became independent, then rice had to be imported and you had to give import tax. So rice had to be subsidized. Yet Sri Lankans are all rice eating. So the poor people, they don't eat so much nutrition sort of producing food. They eat a lot of rice. So if rice subsidy was removed, the poor would be hardest hit. So at that point of time, a more charismatic leader who himself was from upper class and upper caste, but he proclaimed leftist leanings. His name was SWRD Bandaranaike. So Bandaranaike comes to power, and that party is the SLFP party. Now, Bandaranaike was a populist leader, and from that point of time, in Sri Lanka, language and religion became very important issues. So what happened was that Bandaranaike proclaimed the Sinhala Only Act. Now the Sinhala Only Act proclaimed that it would be the sole common official language. There was a lot of, misunderstandings in the Tamil area. So Bandaranaike goes there and promises, okay, when we will have Sinhala Only Act. And he promised that in Tamil areas, there would be two language theory, and Tamil would also be one of the official languages. When he promised this, a lot of Sinhalese were extremely irritated, and upset by him. SWRD Bandaranaike is then assassinated by a Buddhist monk. Although he was the populist leader who sort of brought in this notion of language and religion together in the field of politics. He brought in Sinhala Only Act, but because he gave the excuse to the Tamils and made that exception that in Tamil areas, Tamil will also be another language, the Buddhist and the strident radical Sinhalese got very upset with him, and he was assassinated. Shirimavo Bandaranaike, his widow, took office as prime minister, but there was also a coup attempt in 1962 against her. But Shirimavo Bandaranaike was way more of a strong autocratic leader. So, to make her power stronger, she upholds a leftist government. So it was sort of an oxymoron. In one hand, she was extremely autocratic, and on the other hand, she was upholding leftist politics, which made, sort of a weird sense in the context of Sri Lanka. She was getting closer to Soviet Union, away from Britain, nationalizing industries, and promoting a non-aligned policy, but on the lines of China. So when in 1962 the Sino-Indian border war was fought, and India took this question to United Nations, and there was an effort to make the Colombo Pact, Sri Lanka supported China. Okay, so next slide, please. During the second term as Prime Minister, Shirimavo's government instituted socialist economic policies, further strengthening ties with Soviet Union and China. Though, like India, Sri Lanka continued to promote a policy of non-alignment. Next slide, please. Arifa, can you read this?
Yes, ma'am.
So go
Economic
ahead.
crisis. After the tea boom was over, Sri Lanka experienced economic crisis in 1960s. Though the tea export rose by over 60% between 1947 to 70, the yield in foreign exchange increased by mere 10%. Rubber and coconut also did not fare well, as a result of which the term of trade deteriorated heavily since 1960. Shortage of foreign exchange led to state control over some sector of the economy, which could not help to increase production.
Okay, next slide. Go ahead.
With a new approach of economic development and social welfare, things began to improve since 1967. In 1969, there was a notable improvement in the production of the paddy. In 1970, rice production had reached an all-time high of 75% of self-sufficiency. However, there was another problem. Population growth hit the labor market. Unemployment climbed from 3,70,000 in 1959 to 5,50,000. There was a price rise and scarcity of essential items of consumption.
Next slide. Okay, stop here. Okay, what happened was that till 1965, Shirimavo Bandaranaike ruled as the Prime Minister, as the President. But after that, what happened was, in 1965, she was defeated. However, when the UNP came back to power, the forces that started with Shirimavo Bandaranaike actually became extremely problematic for UNP, particularly because, costs were going up, and although rice production sort of reached its highest point by 1970, but the opposition could not sort of take the advantage that such rice production could yield. So the prices came down, but even though the prices had come down of rice, still there were other issues which clouded the situation. One was, of course, the issue of unemployment. Within 10 years, unemployment reached all-time high for Sri Lanka. And so, people were extremely upset with that, and they brought back Shri Mavo once again to power. Okay? Okay, now who wants to read? Anisha, now? Yes, who is this I? Jaya?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, go ahead, read.
Janata Vimukti Paramuna JVP. Janata Vimukti Paramuna or People's Liberation Front was an ultra-left organization dominated by the educated youth, unemployed or the disadvantageously employed. In 1971, highly dissatisfied with the Bandha-Naiki government on the before-mentioned issues, an insurrection was launched in April 1971. It was the first large-scale revolt against the government by the youth in the country and perhaps was the biggest revolt by the youth in the recorded history.
Next.
It was a movement.
Ma'am, can I read?
Let her finish reading this time, then you can read.
Okay, ma'am.
Okay? No problem.
Yeah, ma'am.
Okay, Jaya, go ahead.
Yes, ma'am. It was a movement of the new or the ultra-left against the established left, the populist Sri Lankan Freedom Party, SLFP, the Lankan Samaj Party, LSSP, the Communist Party, CP, and other traditional parties of the left. The JVP considered the entry into the government by the three left parties in 1964 as a conscious betrayal of the aspirations of the people and the working class. In March 1971, after an accidental explosion in one of the bomb factories, the police found 58 bombs in a hut in a Tigala district. Shortly afterward, Rohana Vijvera, one of the main leaders, was arrested and sent to Jaffna prison, where he remained throughout the revolt.
Okay. So, what was happening is that Bandha-Naiki's government was also a left government. And Bandha-Naiki's government was constantly in collaboration with, the Lanka Samaja Party, the communist parties, etc., the traditional left parties. But by the 60s, one of the reasons why the Sri Lankan Freedom Party lost the election in 1965 was because the youth groups completely went against it. And they felt that the traditional left had really betrayed their cause. They betrayed the cause of the people of the working class. So when they came back to power, when Bandha-Naiki's government came back to power in 70, there was a lot of dissatisfaction with that government. So it was really a fight between the new left and the traditional left. Now, in March 1971, there was an accident, in the sense there was a bomb blast. In that bomb blast, it was put on Rohana Vijayvira, who was the sort of leader of the JVP, the Janata Vimukti Peramuna. Now, the Janata Vimukti Peramuna largely was the organization of the youth, the radical youth, the Sinhala speaking youth, and, they were educated, but they represented the educated people who were speaking in Sinhala language. So the vernacular educated youth, very similar to the Naxalite movement in India. So it was the vernacular educated, representing the working class, the left intellectuals who were young, who joined the JVP. And in 1971, for the first time, there was a revolt of these groups. However, the leader of that group was Rohana Vijayvira. He was a journalist. He was soon arrested and put in Jaffna prison, where he was kept throughout this revolt. Okay, Snehashish, go ahead. Next one, Joya.
Okay, ma'am.
In response to his arrest, the growing pressure of police investigations, other JVP leaders decided to act immediately, and they agreed to begin the uprising at 11 p.m. on April 5. The insurgents were young, poorly armed, and inadequately trained, but success in seizing and holding major areas in southern and central provinces of Sri Lanka before they were defeated by the security force. Their attempt to seize power created a major crisis for the government.
Okay, this is Rohan Abhijavira. Okay, next one, yeah. Go ahead, Snehashish.
After 2 weeks of fighting, the government regained control. The cost of the victory was high, an estimate 15,000 insurgents, many of them in their teens, died in the conflict. The rebels did not have the advantage of a dominating foreign presence against which they could have stirred up a nationalist sentiment. There was no support from either the ruler or urban working class. The army was criticized for using excessive force for curbing the conflict.
Okay, so there was this, movement led by JVP, which was a hugely expensive movement, because what happened was that this was a movement of the young people. So there was an estimated 15,000 teens, young people who died as a result of this conflict. So the problem was the rebels were actually pro-Sinhala, very ethnically rooted. So none of the foreign governments helped them. Also, they had been stirring up nationalist sentiment, so anti-foreigner sentiment. But their problem was neither the rural working class nor the urban working class actually proactively supported them. And the army put it down with a huge amount of force. So this was a precursor to the formation in the Tamil regions of the Tamil radical youth who would now join LTT. So during the mid-70s, on the basis of JVP in Snala region, you would have the growth of LTT in Tamil regions. Next one, please. Go ahead. Snehashish.
Okay, ma'am. Consequences. The success over the rebels boosted the prestige of the army and the police force. The Sri Lankan government got international help in curbing the insurrection. India, Britain, USA, Eastwhile USSR, Pakistan, Egypt, and Yugoslavia sent help. After the movement, the government became more authoritarian.
Okay, thank you. So what happened was that the rebels, fought very hard. But ultimately, the state always has way more power than any rebellion. Because the foreign governments helped Sri Lanka, just like in Ukraine today. And, United States, India, Britain all supported Sri Lanka. And so they ultimately defeated the rebels. That boosted the prestige of the Sri Lankan army a lot. And since force was the way to victory, the Sri Lankan government decided that would be the correct strategy to face with these rebellions, and they became more and more authoritarian and autocratic. Okay, next slide.
What followed?
Nash, Ayan, Sheikh Ayan.
Yes, ma'am.
Why don't you read it?
Sure, ma'am. What followed? The insurrection of 1971 played an important role in shaping the future of Sri Lanka.
Are you having problems? We can't hear you there. We can't hear you.
Oh, shall I read it again?
Yes, please. Can you hear? Can the others hear?
No, ma'am.
No, ma'am. I think so he's having a network issue.
Ma'am, shall I read it?
Sheikh Ayan, go ahead. I can't hear anything.
Ma'am, I think he's having a network issue.
I think so too. So who else is there?
Ma'am, can I
Ma'am,
read?
shall I? Yes,
Gurleen,
ma'am. Yes,
would you
ma'am.
like to read?
Sure, ma'am. What followed? The insurrection of 1971 played an important role in shaping the future of Sri Lanka. Post 71, it moved towards being a socialist society. There were demands for radical economic and social changes. The Land Reform Law of 1972 was passed and the plantations were nationalized in 1975. There was almost total state control over trade and industry.
Next, please.
The UF government experienced a problem of balance of payment. Sri Lanka imported more food items than it did export. There were cuts in food subsidies and welfare expenditure. Emphasis was given to agricultural development and self-sufficiency in food. The left and SLFP favored industrialization. In 1972, Sri Lanka assumed the status of a republic under Bandaranaike. A constitution was introduced in 1978 which made the executive president the head of the state.
Is there anything to explain in this? এটাতে কি কোনো কিছু explain করতে হবে?
No, ma'am.
Okay, so next slide.
Under the new constitution, Sri Lanka became a more authoritarian and less liberal. J.R. Jayawardene came to power in 1977, defeating the then unpopular United Front government. Jayawardene introduced a new constitution as per which there was to be powerful executive head, the president, modeled after France and a free market economy.
Okay. Next slide. Yeah. Now, Atya, can you read it? Atya?
Yes. What
So please read it.
led to the second insurrection? Ethnic tensions between the Tamils and Sinhalese heightened the Sri Lanka. Sinhals heightened a Sri Lanka experience riots in July 1983. Black July riots where thousands of Tamils were killed. As a result of which more than 150,000 Tamil civilians fled the island, seeking asylum in other countries.
Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Go ahead, Atya.
Yes. After the riots, there was a shift in the ideology and goals of the JVP, which was initially Marxist in orientation and claimed to represent the interests of both the Tamil and Sinhalese sections. There was a tilt toward Sinhalese nationalism. The government proscribed JVP, claiming they were involved in the Black July riot.
Okay. Next slide, Onesha Nag, Poroto.
Yes, ma'am.
Onesha, you have 2 or 3 instruments, probably 2 instruments in your house. Go ahead.
After the riots, JVP was once again banned and its leadership went underground. The group's activities intensified in the second half of 1987 in the wake of the Indo-Sri Lankan Accord. The prospect of Tamil autonomy in the north, together with the presence of Indian troops, stirred up a wave of Sinhalese nationalism and a sudden growth of anti-government violence.
Next slide.
1987-89 insurrection. A new group emerged that was an offshoot of the JVP, the Patriotic Liberation Organization, Deshpremi Janata Viyaparaya, DJV, the Patriotic Liberation Organization led by Saman Piasiri Fernando. A grenade attack in the Sri Lankan parliament took place on August 18, 1987, and the DJV accepted responsibility for the attack. A campaign against the ruling party, which often turned violent, killed many members of the parliament.
Next, please. Go ahead, Anisha.
Was still underground and the JVP had no clear leadership at that time, it was doubtful if it could launch a coordinated attack against the government. The arrival of the Indian peacekeeping force gave rise to widespread nationalist sentiments among large sections of the Sinhalese population.
Next slide.
Taking advantage of the situation, the JVP began to confront the state machinery and its ideological opponents. The government faced the problem of curbing down a violent movement. Alongside, there was the apprehension that the army officials had links with JVP.
Okay.
In order to prevent
Go ahead, since you've started reading.
In order to prevent a repetition of the 1971 uprising, the government considered lifting the ban on the JVP in early 1988, but this did not prove to be effective. The operation was carried through cells comprising members. The focal point of operation was around Matara in the south. The JVP inflicted the country with violence and forcefully enforced hartals which lasted for 2 years.
Okay, Shatodru, can you read the next slide? Shatodru?
Yes, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay, around 50,000 lives were lost in the 1987-89 insurrection. Many more died when the UNP government came down heavily with all its might. There was a huge loss of private as well as government property.
Next slide.
1 minute. How it ended. The government forces captured and killed
JVP leader Rohana Vijivera.
Yes. Leader Rohana Vijayawardena and his deputy in November 1989 in Colombo. By early 1990, they had killed or imprisoned the remaining JVP Politburo members and detained an estimated 7,000 JVP members. Okay. Next slide. Its consequences. 1 minute. Yes. Prematasa was propelled into even quicker action following the JVP-led youth insurrection of 87-89, which initially began as one opposed to the Indo-Lanka Accord of 87 and later metamorphosed into an economic one. Though the government won a decisive military victory which gave boost to its stature, different organizations accused the government being brutal in its dealing with the problem.
Next one. Forget it. You don't have to study this. So we end with the second JVP insurrection. Okay, so stop sharing. Please come back now. Just stop sharing. Yeah, yes. Okay, so যারা বাংলায় পড়ছো তারা এটা বোঝার চেষ্টা করো যে বামপন্থী আন্দোলন কিভাবে শ্রীলঙ্কায় শুরু হলো। 1930, 32, 34 এই 1934-এ এসে লঙ্কা সমাজা পার্টি প্রথম একটা বামপন্থী অর্গানাইজেশন যেটা ক্ষমতায় মানে আসার কাছাকাছি এলো এবং তারাই কনস্টিটিউশনালিস্টদের এগেনস্টে এতটা পপুলারিটি পেল। তারপরে পরবর্তীকালে দেশের নেতৃত্বে আসে সেনানায়কা, কিন্তু সেনানায়কা ওয়াজ এ সেন্ট্রিস্ট লিডার। কিন্তু যখন জিনিসের দাম বাড়তে লাগলো এবং খাদ্যের অভাব হলো, শুধু তাই নয়, চালের সাবসিডি ভর্তুকি সেগুলো কমিয়ে দেওয়া হলো। তো গরিব মানুষের কাছে সেটা একটা সাংঘাতিক অসুবিধার জায়গায় আসতে লাগলো। সে মত অবস্থায় জনতা বিমুক্তি পেরুমনা বলে একটা অর্গানাইজেশন গ্রো করতে লাগলো। এখন জেভিপির রিভোল্টটাকে আমরা বলতে পারি যে পুরনো বামপন্থীদের সাথে নতুন বামপন্থীদের মধ্যে দ্বন্দ্ব। এই নতুন বামপন্থীরা কিন্তু বিদেশি শিক্ষায় শিক্ষিত ছিল না, এরা শ্রীলঙ্কার ভাষায় শিক্ষিত ছিল, এবং তার ফলে এদের একটা পপুলিস্ট একটা পপুলারিটি ছিল, এবং এই পপুলারিটির ফলে তারা গ্রামে গঞ্জে কিন্তু অনেক বেশি সাহায্য পেয়েছিল। কিন্তু এরা বামপন্থী হলে কি হবে, এদেরকে কিন্তু যারা খেটে খাওয়া মানুষ, যারা ওয়ার্কিং ক্লাস, তারাও সাপোর্ট করলো না, আবার বিদেশি কোনো ক্ষমতাও তাদের সাহায্যে এলো না। সেই জন্য তারা প্রথম ইনসারেকশন 71 সালে করলো। সেইবারে রোহান বিজয়বেরাকে, যেটা জেভিপির যে লিডার ছিল, তাকে তারা অ্যারেস্ট করে নিল, এবং প্রচন্ড রকম ভাবে দমন নীতিতে তারা এই জেভিপির আন্দোলনকে দমন করলো। তারপরে 7-8 বছর ধরে আবার জেভিপি গ্রুপ করলো, এবং 78-79 এসে আবার তারা একটা প্রোটেস্ট করতে লাগলো এবং সরকারের বিরুদ্ধে অস্ত্র তুলে নিল। সেই সময়ে হাজারো হাজারো জার্নালিস্ট, শিক্ষিত মানুষ, যারাই জেভিপির সাথে কোনোভাবে কম্প্রোমাইজ করেছে, তাদেরকেই চেষ্টা করা হলো, সরকার চেষ্টা করলো তাদেরকে মেরে ফেলতে, অথবা তাদেরকে জেলের ভেতর পুরে দেওয়া হলো। 7,000, 8,000, এক এক বছরে 7-8 হাজার করে ইয়াং কম বয়সী ছেলেরা, বিশেষ করে মেয়েরাও ছিল, তাদেরকে সরকার জেলে পুরে দিতে লাগলো। এবং এর বিরুদ্ধে একদিকে জেভিপি অস্ত্র নিয়ে সরকারের বিরুদ্ধে লড়াই করছে, তার মধ্যে সরকার জেভিপির সাথে লড়াই করছে, তামিলদের সাথে এলটিটি তখন তৈরি হয়ে গেছে, তামিলদের সাথে লড়াই করছে, এবং তখন তারা একেবারে দমন নীতি হচ্ছে কেটে ফেলে দাও সবাইকে। রোহান বিজয়বেরাকে তারা মেরে দিল, রোহান বিজয়বেরা যে ডেপুটি ছিল তাকে তারা মেরে দিল। কোন সন্ধির আলোচনার বাইরে তারা সিনহালিস্টদের ওইভাবে মারতে লাগলো। এইবারে সরকার বুঝতে পারলো যে ফোর্সের দ্বারা তারা যদি এটাকে দমন না করার চেষ্টা করে, তাহলে কিন্তু এদের মধ্যে নেসেন্ট একটা পপুলারিটি এসেই যাবে। তো কাজেই একটা ভীষণ কস্টলি যুদ্ধের মাধ্যমে এদেরকে এই জেভিপি কে দমন করা হলো। সেই সময় হাজারো হাজারো জার্নালিস্ট, মিউজিশিয়ান, সবাই হঠাৎ করে তাদেরকে আর খুঁজে পাওয়া যেত না, আর্মি তাদেরকে মেরে জঙ্গলে ফেলে দিয়ে চলে আসতো, এবং সাধারণ কেউ না, বড় বড় নাম করা লোকেরা, আমার পরিচিত একজন ছিল বিশাল নাম করা জার্নালিস্ট মিলন বলে, তাকে মেরে ফেলা হলো এবং তাকে অ্যাসাসিনেট করে জঙ্গলে ফেলে দেওয়া। এইটা সরকার তুমি কারোর বডি পাবে না, কারণ শ্রীলঙ্কার চতুর্দিকে জল, কাজে লিডারশিপ ছাড়া যারা সাধারণ মানুষ ছিল তাদেরকে তো মেরে জলে ফেলে দেওয়া হতো। তো এইরকম ভাবে এই আন্দোলনগুলোকে দমন করা হলো, এবং প্রচন্ড ফোর্সের সাথে। এর ফলে একদিকে যেরকম সরকার অটোক্রাটিক হতে লাগলো, অন্যদিকে শ্রীলঙ্কার ইউথ ওয়াজ অলসো radicalized। এইটা হচ্ছে মোটামুটি জেভিপি আন্দোলন। এই দুটো আন্দোলনের মাধ্যমে আমরা যে ভাবি তামিলদের বিরুদ্ধে প্রথম শ্রীলঙ্কান সরকার অস্ত্র তুলেছিল, তা নয়, তারা অস্ত্র কিন্তু তুলেছিল সিনালিস্টদের বিরুদ্ধে। এবং এই সিনালিস্টদের মধ্যে ছিল যারা জেভিপি। তো মোটামুটি এটাই আর কি, যেটা হলো সেটা হচ্ছে যে 71-এর এই লড়াইয়ের ফলে সরকার কিন্তু বুঝতে পেরে গেল যে লড়াই না করলে তাদের কোনো উপায় নেই, এবং সেই জন্য তারা প্রচন্ড ভাবে দমন করতে লাগলো। হ্যাঁ
ম্যাম তাহলে কি আমরা বলতে পারি ওটা শ্রীলঙ্কার মানে নকশাল আন্দোলনেরই একটা কপি পেস্ট পুরোপুরি? এখানে যেমন দমন পীড়ন চালানো হয়েছিল।
নকশাল আন্দোলনে কিন্তু একটা কসমোপলিটন সাইডও ছিল, কিন্তু নকশাল আন্দোলনে যেটা ছিল না সেটা হচ্ছে কোনো বহিরাগত এফেক্ট ছিল না। এখানে কিন্তু জেভিপি শুধু শ্রীলঙ্কার সরকার নয়, ইন্ডিয়ান পিস কিপিং ফোর্সের বিরুদ্ধেও লেগেছিল। এই সময় কিন্তু ইন্ডিয়ান পিস কিপিং ফোর্স জাফনায় ঢুকে গেছিল এবং চেষ্টা করেছিল যে তাদের ক্ষমতা দিয়ে কি করে সেই জাফনার লড়াইটাকে তারা বন্ধ করতে পারে। তো কাজে কি মানে অনেকটাই নকশাল আন্দোলনের আদলে গড়ে উঠেছিল, কিন্তু এই যে কাট এন্ড পেস্টের মতো তুমি যে বলছো সেটাও নয়, এর
কিছু অ্যাসপেক্ট মিলে যাচ্ছে, যেমন দমন পীড়নটা মিলছে, তারপর কমিউনিস্ট পার্টি গুলো ওটা সরকারকে সাপোর্ট করেছিল, সিপিআই সরকারকে সাপোর্ট করেছিল কংগ্রেসকে, এখানে ঠিক একইভাবে
অনেক কিছু মিলে যাচ্ছে, অনেক কিছু মিলে যাচ্ছে, আবার কিছু কিছু
করে দেওয়া হতো এখানেও।
ঠিক আছে, আমি কি কি পড়ালাম তাহলে এই সেমেস্টারে বলো?
Ma'am, we did non-democratic experiments in Pakistan. We did and Sri Lanka, some portions of ASEAN.
ASEAN, so what's her name? Shongvida is teaching you ASEAN, isn't it?
And ma'am is teaching us terrorism in South Asia.
Okay. And what is, what's his name? Anup teaching?
ম্যাম সংবিধান সাউথ ইস্ট এশিয়া টেরোরিজম পড়াচ্ছে।
Civil societies and post globalization.
Okay. Post globalization a little bit even I taught.
But that
sorry, I taught post Second World War. I taught post Second World War South and Southeast Asia. Remember, that is where I started.
Ma'am, in first class you taught us this part.
Yeah, why first class? I taught this in 2-3 different classes.
Yes,
I even
yes,
showed PowerPoints on that. Don't forget, I taught post Second World War, South and Southeast Asia. Then I taught non-democratic experiments from militarization in Pakistan and JVP movement in Sri Lanka and authoritarian government in Sri Lanka in response to JVP movement. Okay?
Okay, ma'am.
Okay, ma'am.
Okay. মনে পড়ছে তো?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes,
okay.
ma'am.
And what is Priya ma'am teaching?
Ma'am, Tanishanism.
Yeah, so I did unit 1 and unit 3. Priya ma'am is doing unit 2. Anup sir is doing unit 4. Okay?
Yes, ma'am.
So
yes,
all your units are more or less covered. Is that okay?
Okay, ma'am.
Yes.
Okay, I will not take any more classes. My topics are over here. I already taught 4 topics. You can only get, you will have to write 2 long questions, 2 short questions. So I taught 4 topics. And I can give you questions on these 4 topics. Okay? Understood?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
So,
Ma'am, can you please give us any material from Sri Lanka part, if possible?
yes, I will give you materials. Not to worry.
Ma'am, I have a question. Suppose when we are pertaining to the question of Sri Lanka, non-democratic experiments in Sri Lanka, so ma'am, we will start from the JVP or we will start it like the timeline from Bandar Naiki?
Well, definitely Shrimavo Bandhan Naike.
Okay,
when
ma'am.
the authoritarianism starts.
Okay, ma'am. Okay, ma'am.
Okay?
Okay, ma'am. Ma'am, if you give us some suggestion, then it would be helpful for us.
What do you mean suggestions? My suggestion is whatever I taught. We will discuss the entire paper after it's over. One day I will meet you with all the other teachers and we will sit and discuss it. That I will try to do offline.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Okay then.
Ma'am.
All of you put your names in the chat, and Jagodhatri, please send me the names.
Ma'am, are we going to send our PPT prior to the exam, means internal
Yes,
assessment?
you have to send me by 1st of July.
Okay, ma'am.
Okay. Not more than 3 slides. With the introductory slides where you put your name, roll number, registration number, everything, not class roll number, exam roll number. Where you put that, including that, then 4 slides. You will only get 5 to 6 minutes to talk. And not more than 3 points per slide. Because if you see, 5 marks will be on slides and 5 marks on your presentation. If I see you messing up your slides, I will deduct 5 marks. So if you write unnecessarily paragraph after paragraphs in your slides, I will just deduct marks. Follow my directions. 3 slides of content per slide, maximum 3 points. Those of you who will give me neat, presentable slides will get more marks. Okay?
Okay, ma'am.
And if we don't finish it on the 2nd, I will go on the 3rd. It is a Sunday, I know, but we are doing online exams, so it really doesn't matter. Okay? Or if you don't want to do that, I can start at 12 and end at 10 o'clock at night. I don't care. Understood? Hello?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. 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 Be good girls and good boys and send me clean, neat slides so that you get more marks. Okay. Jagodhatri, did you get their names? Is Jagodhatri here? No. Jaya, then you have to do it.
Okay, ma'am, I'll take the screenshots. Okay, ma'am.
Okay. Okay. Okay then. Bye-bye. Take care.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay.
Okay, ma'am.